Hi, this is Stephanie A. from All About Adoption. So, this is going to round out our three-part series where we talk about why does adoption cost so much. This week, we're going to talk about how to be able to afford the adoption process. The adoption journey is unique and different for every adoption. Even if you've adopted multiple children, each journey is very different, and how you fund that journey is different as well. I will tell you, few families start out with having all of the money that they need for the adoption process when they especially start looking at adoption. And also, a lot of families come to adoption off of infertility and all the expenses that are involved in the infertility treatment. So very few families come to the adoption process with all the funds available, and that's okay. There are ways to be able to gather the funds and to be able to adopt. So I first want to say is that the average person who is going to be able to adopt is going to be able to afford to adopt. There are hundreds of avenues of ways to be able to afford something that you really want, especially as important as having a child join your family. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is you got to create a plan. You have to think of a funding plan, and then also creating a timeline of when those fees are due. So let's break down into the different ways that you can do this. So the first thing you're going to find is savings. Rarely do all of us have, as I mentioned earlier, the savings for this. So you're going to find that budgeting is really going to be very helpful in rearranging your budget. You may find that you're going to have to drop cable, or you're going to have to drop that streaming service, or you may find that you would need to pick up another job to be able to, or we call it a side hustle, to be able to have additional funds. Or you can even go into the part where you just sell stuff that you have. So start with what you've got, and then you can branch out from there. Another place that I would recommend starting is checking your employer. Employers a lot of times will have employee benefits with adoption. So start there. And then next I would move to grants and applying for grants. Now just know that when you're applying for a grant, you can't do that until you've had your home study done. So just know that. I'm going to link below to a resource that I refer families to when they're looking at doing grants. It's a little grant boot camp, and I think you'll find that helpful to take that. Also, if you're in the military often has adoption benefits, so you can check that out as well. So there is the adoption federal tax credit. The only drawback to the federal tax credit is that you need to have all your funds that you've already spent on your adoption process to be able to get those funds back. But it is a huge help to know that the tax credit is there. As of recording this video, it's right around $14,000, and that can be spread out over a 5-year period of time to be able to gather all that money and gather that tax credit back in for the expenses that you have spent. Now, there is state tax credits as well. Typically, those are for children who come from foster care or a child who has special needs. Also, when a child comes from foster care, a lot of times they come with what's called a subsidy, and that's a monthly stipend to be able to help you to afford to continue raising that child once you adopt them. But in addition, the subsidy usually covers the expenses that you've had when pursuing a foster care adoption. So sometimes if you are a church member, sometimes churches will help with funding adoptions. And then also refinancing your home and being able to save money in that direction as well is some ways that families will go about coming up with the funds. Another way is doing fundraising. Some people really frown upon fundraising for an adoption. So because it gives the appearance that you're asking for money to be able to get a child, but really what you're doing is you're asking for money to help with the expenses that it takes to be able to adopt a child. So fundraising, there are thousands of ideas on how to do fundraising, and there are crowdfunding platforms that are specific to adoption, and we'll link to some resources below in the video notes with regards to some of the avenues that I've talked about in this video, and then also some fundraising ideas as well. So there are other avenues such as pursuing a personal loan and then also what's called an adoption loan. There are resources out there to be able to borrow money. That's not the best way to go about it, but it certainly is an avenue out there to be able to get your funds in that way. Most of our families that we end up working with, a lot of times will get what's called a HELOC. And basically it's a line of credit that is against their home, and then the families will pay that back with their federal tax credit. Now, I'm going to give you some avenues that I don't think are my favorite, but I can't ignore them because they are ways to be able to borrow money. So one is a credit card. You can always get a credit card and put your adoption expenses on that, although I don't recommend that. What I do recommend with credit cards is a lot of times you can get points, and using your points, for example, if you need to travel to another state, using your air mile points on your card, so that can help offset some of the cost. Borrowing from family and friends, once again, not highly recommended, but it is an avenue. A lot of times you'll find that grandparents will just give you the money towards your adoption as well. And the last avenue is borrowing against your 401k. Once again, not my favorite idea to recommend to families, but there is a new law that's been passed that you are able to pull money out for an adoption without being penalized. So that is available now to families. So don't let the cost of adoption be the reason that stops you from adopting. Every year, thousands of families complete their adoption process despite the cost of adoption. Stay focused on your goal, and that is your goal of being able to have a child join your family and to be able to love that child for the rest of their lives. Let that be your motivation when times get hard and you feel like this is just a mountain that you just can't climb. Just know that it's worth it in the end. That's the end of this 3-part series, and I thank you so much for joining me for it. Bye.